Bad news for Jaron Boots Ennis. But first, Amantis Stanionis, congratulations. You are the new welterweight champion of the world. Brand new news. Boom. I made this graphic. Terence Crawford has officially vacated, which means that Stanionis is now the full champion. Make sure you guys follow me on social media. You guys see the WBA, they have this graphic out. Amantis Stanionis, who was basically the interim champion, now that Crawford has officially vacated, he becomes the full-body recognized champion with the belt in the weight class. So again, congratulations. So you guys see on the WBA website, Crawford moved up to 54 to fight Madrimov, and he has now decided to keep the WBA super welterweight belt, or at least that's what he's told the WBA, right? He says that's the belt. It says Terence Crawford decided to remain as champion in the super welterweight division 154 of the World Boxing WBA and vacate his welterweight belt, according to what he formally communicated to the Pioneer organization. The American sent a letter in which he informed his decision to keep the 154-pound belt and vacate the 147-pound belt, which means that it leaves the Lithuanian Amantis Stanionis as the only welterweight champion. Crawford won the title last August in his victory over Israel Madrimov in Los Angeles, and at the time he was a champion in two different divisions. Now he has decided that he will stay at super welterweight and continue his career in that category. The Pioneer body received the communication and responded to Crawford with a letter signed by the director and championship committee, Carlos Chavez, in which he acknowledged receipt and sent a wave of thanks and recognition. So boom. Now, Eddie Hearn believes Crawford wants only Canelo and he'll retire, but Crawford had to make a decision. Upon beating Madrimov for the title at 154, he was previously undisputed when he beat Errol Spence Jr., but little by little, all those belts pretty much got vacated. And the WBA was probably the last of it, if I'm correct, because Mario Barrios is the WBC champion. Brian Norman got elevated with the WBO in Top Rank. Jaron Ennis, he got stripped of that belt. That's the IBF, and then now the WBA. So basically, Terence Bud Crawford is no longer a welterweight. That's done. Welterweight is over, which makes sense. And it's so funny because Boxing Ego, the best in the business, and it's not even close. I made so much content for Errol Spence, Terence Crawford. It was a big fight. Wanted to see it. And in that content, I told you that Errol Spence, which wasn't surprising because Errol stayed a welterweight. So, you know, I didn't put as much emphasis on it. But Terence Crawford, he looked sucked up for the Errol Spence fight week at the Grand Arrivals. And then I was like, man, the weight cut looks like it's really getting to him. I never really seen Bud look like that on fight week that early, right? But over the years, getting older and stuff, it's harder to shave that weight. And he packed on some size, packed on some muscles, plus age. Metabolism slows down. You know, testosterone slows down as you get older. And I think that weight became harder, even though Crawford's a gym rat. He's disciplined, he stays in shape. I think that weight became very hard for him to get off. And I was talking about how Terence Crawford's face looked sucked up and stuff, and now it all makes sense. The very next fight, he moves up to 54, and he even did interviews before the Madrimov fight saying that even 154 is a chore. It takes effort to make. He said it's not easy making 47 for sure, and it's not even easy to make 154. Crawford said that in the interview, I believe, with DAZN. So I'm glad that it's all over now. Crawford already set history, and there's no need to hold the belts hostage. So we got the new wave of welterweights, and we can see who could take over the division. Hopefully we get a unification. And I'm glad that Crawford has, his correspondence with the sanctioning bodies, and now all 4 have been lifted from Crawford, because it doesn't make sense for, I don't know how Canelo is getting away with it, like when he had all the undisputed belts, and it's like he has no rules. So that's another story. That's another video. But the IBF stripped Crawford, and then now we fully know that Crawford is pretty much done and communicating that he's done with welterweight, which is not really news if you follow the channel. But the news that I did want to talk about is Stanionis. Stanionis is now the champion. So what does this mean? Now, for me, what this means, and now I'll make it make sense, what I said at the beginning, I said bad news for Jaron Boots Ennis. Okay, why would I say that? For me, the reason I'm saying bad news for Jaron Ennis is PBC has 2 belts and belt holders now at welterweight. Crawford's done. They got Mario Barrios with the WBC, and with the WBA, they got the full champion, Amantis Stanionis. There were rumors and rumblings that Mario Barrios could fight Pacquiao, which means to me, and I don't work for PBC, so I'm just spitballing. Let's say Barrios fights Pacquiao sometime this year. They'll probably give Stanionis, maybe even on the same card, they'll give Stanionis probably a tune-up fight, because he's had some issue with activity because of the Virgil Ortiz situation. Again, I've already made videos about this, so if you don't know, then basically watch my old videos and catch up. So Stanionis, I think he's owed probably like a decent tune-up style fight. And then the winner of Pacquiao Barrios and Stanionis can unify in 2025. You see how that works? The other issue is Brian Norman. You had an opportunity in a certain window to make Jaron Boots Ennis versus Brian Norman Jr. fight, and Eddie Hearn failed. What can I say? He failed. You couldn't appease him. You couldn't lure him to leave his home base, ESPN, Top Rank, for whatever reason. Some people are like, oh, it was enough money. It's not up to you as a fan who's never touched this type of money anyway to decide. Brian Norman already told you, his side already told you, that they would have owed to cross the street and fight Boots off rip. They would have owed Top Rank 20%, and 20% of 1.5 million. That's the 300K. So you're just giving away 300K. 40-50% of that goes to taxes, and so on and so forth. You got sparring partners, house and lodging, and track suits for your team, and a cut man. Like, the money goes quicker than you think. So they didn't like the number. Jaron Ennis, it is what it is. But the downside for Ennis is your side, you left Showtime. Be clear, you weren't a PBC fighter, but you were intertwined with the PBC because you were fighting on PBC cards, like Gervonta Davis when you fought Karen, right? Boots became a free agent, breach of contract, whatever. Cameron Duncan estate, they hashed it out. Rest in peace, Cameron Duncan. Boots became a free agent. Instead of staying with Steven Espinoza, instead of staying with Showtime, okay, they're out of business. So basically committing to PBC, we'll say, you ran over to Eddie Hearn and Turkey on DAZN. And so far, what have you gotten from it? You're probably getting more money than you previously were getting per fight. Okay, that's one thing. You got a Philly hometown fight, but I'm not really impressed with that because you're from Philly. They don't need to promote you where you're already from because you already have Philly already holds you down. You're already popping in Philly. But Eddie Hearn, who's not American, he don't know America. So you have a ninja and you don't know what to do with them and you don't have a big fight. I'll just give him a Philly fight. And that's probably where Boots' next fight will be too, to be fair. You know what I mean? Because it's another lackluster opponent that he already beat, which is likely the Karen fight. So you see how this is playing out. So your first 2 fights with Eddie Hearn are likely David Avanesian and Karen, a guy you already beat that no one wants to see you fight again because the first fight wasn't even good, right? So I think you see how this is playing out. PBC, they got more options, especially with Stanionis having a belt now and Barrios having a belt. Top Rank, they even have an option. I've already went over it. People were like, oh, Boots offered him 1.5 and he's going to fight on Keyshawn's undercard. Yeah, he's going to fight on Keyshawn's undercard. That's the plan. He just fought. So that's his second time. It's just like probably a stay busy fight. But we already heard the rumors. We heard the rumblings that they wanted to make Brian Norman versus Teofimo Lopez, who plans on moving up to welterweight. So if that actually happens, which I think Top Rank can get that done, you see right there, Teofimo suggests that Brian Norman at welterweight is next. Teofimo is right now training with Canelo, and he looks big. So I don't doubt that he's probably moving to welterweight. So guess what that means? Boots getting paid, I guess, better or cool, short-term thinking instead of the long-term thinking. If Brian Norman fights Teofimo, that's a fight that's interesting to me because I want to see how Teo even looks, and he has a brand and a profile. So guess what? If Top Rank gets that done, they'll have a better fight for their new champion, Brian Norman versus Teofimo. That's a hot fight. Who is Boots fighting on DAZN? He's not getting Virgil Ortiz or Israel Madrimov or Crawford or any big names. It's just a finger pointing game. Oh, everyone's afraid of him. No one will sign the contract. They should have took the deal. Okay, well, they didn't take the deal. So as I see it, and I'm usually pretty keen on these things, PBC has options. I could easily see the play where Barrios Pacquiao winner possibly fights Stanionis in a unification. So that's done. Brian Norman, probably a stay busy fight, and then maybe a Teofimo Lopez fight, which again that's much better than Boots versus Chuka Dazian and Boots versus David Avocado, right? Boots is a talented fighter. So the danger is you need some semblance of opposition that's capable. Otherwise, who really needs to see it? If the fans don't believe, because we know Boots is a good fighter, we just need to see what level he's at. And the only way to do that is to line him up with someone that's compelling. So I ask you, did Boots make the right choice? Because I questioned it when he signed to Eddie Hearn, because I thought it was short-sighted, and it's looking like Boxing Ego was right. Now, I know the haters, they're going to say, oh, Showtime, they didn't promise him any fights and this and that. Listen, I'll make a separate video about this. If you guys type PBC welterweights, but don't insult my intelligence. Y'all know I'm the best in the business, and it's not even close. Please don't insult my intelligence. People are going to now question PBC making the diligent fights at welterweight. We just watched Danny Garcia fight Errol Spence, Keith Thurman, Sean Porter. He fought all those fights. You had Errol Spence who fought Ugas, Sean Porter, this Lamont Peterson. He fought all the fights. So PBC was making all the in-house fights. Sean Porter fought, everybody. Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia, Ugas, Errol Spence. So what are we talking about? PBC has been round robining the top welterweights over the last several years. So why would it be crazy to feel that if Boots, had he stayed with Steven Espinoza and actually committed to PBC, that he wouldn't get a Barrios, he wouldn't get a Stanionis, now that they're all champions in the same company? but he chose not to stay, which is his choice. But I think it was a grave mistake, because now it's not an in-house fight anymore. So Eddie Hearn, who doesn't even have a great relationship with Al Heyman in the PBC, he's going to have to try to somehow lure Barrios and Stanionis, and he already said he sent him an offer and it got turned down for whatever reason. So what is Boots going to do? Allegedly, all 3 unifications that Boots can have, they were offered so much money and they all turned it down. So the game don't wait. Everybody's going to just keep making their fights, and then it's going to be a situation where it's like, who is Boots fighting? And then for anyone to suggest that if Boots stayed and committed to Al Heyman and Espinoza, they wouldn't have looked after him is foolish, because Errol Spence, what was he doing the whole time? After he beat Kell Brook and became a champion, it was Lamont Peterson. He had to take care of his mandatory Ocampo. They were building a star, giving him the looks. He fought in L.A. in the unification with Sean Porter. You know, he fought Danny Garcia coming back from the accident. It was supposed to be at the Super Bowl, the week of the Super Bowl, but Errol Spence got in the car wreck, so that's why that didn't happen. So they branded Errol Spence, gave him all the opportunities. About the only fight that didn't happen is Errol Spence and Keith Thurman, and that was just one-off fight. But everybody else at welterweight, they had major players they were fighting, right? Errol Spence then went on and fought Ugas, and he was unifying. He was fighting everybody within the PBC. So now that he's at 54, Crawford's at 54, if Boots committed to Espinoza, do you really think they wouldn't give him Barrios and Stanionis fights and give him these options? Now that he's with Eddie Hearn, I don't know if he gets those options. See how that works? And you notice when these other promoters, not PBC, right, when they have major players in a certain division, they're not getting none of the fights done that are in-house. What do I mean? So you have Virgil Ortiz, Madrimov, Jaron Ennis, Conor Benn. They're all relatively kind of around the same 2 divisions. None of them are fighting. Should be easy to make those in-house fight. None of them are fighting. Or when you had guys at 160 and 68 like Canelo, Triple G, Demetrius Andrade, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Smith. They didn't give Demetrius Andrade, Caleb Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, Triple G, Canelo, Danny Jacobs, nothing. Barely any of those fights were happening. You can't say the same with PBC. When PBC has a strong arm in a division, the guys actually fight. So that's why I say bad news for Jaron Ennis. You guys can try to spin it whatever type of way. Oh, he's the boogeyman. And listen, you have a team, you have a promoter that you pay. It's up to them to make the fights. And I could just see the welterweight division producing some next generation good fights. And I really don't see Jaron Ennis being in the mix because of who he's aligned with. That's my honest opinion. And maybe that changes. We'll see. But they'll probably have to overpay to get that done. Because if you're PBC, why would you send Barrios or Stanionis to DAZN so he can be judged by DAZN commentators who are horrible and be on the platform when you can just make Barrios and Pacquiao, Barrios and Stanionis in-house? You have the power to do the fights in-house. Rolly was talking about he wanted to move to welterweight, right? So you could do Barrios versus Rolly. I mean, it's just so many options. You guys will see. I'm not worried about it. Stay tuned.